Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about another form of intaglio printmaking known as Aquatint. While hard ground etching gives you a lovely line etch, soft ground etching you can get pencil-like lines or texture, Aquatint is designed to give you tone. It can give you a good tonal range. It works on the premise that your plate is coated with a thin layer of rosin dust. The rosin dust is acid resistant. The plate is slightly heated, so the rosin dust adheres to the plate. So across your plate you have thousands upon thousands of rosin dust particles, and in between those dust particles you have the open metal of the plate. So when the plate is placed in the ferric chloride will eat in between those rosin dust particles, and depending on the depth, a deeper etch will hold more ink, a shallower etch will hold less ink. You will get a different tonal range. I've done a very brief sketch here. So this is the plate with the rosin dust sitting on top. This plate will be heated from underneath. The rosin will slightly melt and stick to the plate. You don't want to overheat the plate because the rosin, if you do, it'll just melt together and it'll be different globules. All you want is the dust particle. So when it's adhered to the plate, you can put it into the ferric chloride, and the ferric chloride will eat down in between where the rosin dust is. So the deeper this etch, the more ink it will hold and the darker the tone will be. So when you've etched your plate to the depth you want, you take off this rosin dust and you're left with your plate which has been etched at different depths, and each depth will have different levels of ink, so you'll have different tonalities. The one danger is if you leave it in for too long. The ferric chloride loves zinc, it loves eating zinc, so it will eventually cut down, but then it will go sideways and it will lift off the aquatint and you'll get a grey again. You won't be you'll have a plate tone, the colour of the plate. So you have to bear in mind that. And that is basically the basic of Aquatint that we're going to do today. Now this plate has been prepared in exactly the same way that I did for the hard ground etching. I've beveled the edges. I've now degreased it. Degreasing is very, very important, otherwise there's a chance that the rosin dust won't stick. Now you can actually use a plate you've already had a drawing on, and you can add a tone to that. So just say you have a picture of a dog and you want its coat to be a dark grey, you can actually put Aquatint on top of your line etch, and when you print it you'll have a tonality. Or you can just build up a direct tonal image just using the Aquatint. As you can see in a couple of these little demos that John already did. As I said, these plates would have had the Aquatint applied. This white area would have been stopped out so it won't be touched by the acid. And the rest of the plate is left in, and it's been in for 10 minutes. So you clean it off and you ink it up. You get the white area of the plate and you get the lovely tonal area of the Aquatint. And what we're going to try and do today is one of these. This is basically just a test strip, which is always valuable to do. And as you can see, it gives you different etching times to get from a very light colour to a very dark colour. Doing one of these is very helpful because it cuts out the middleman. You know exactly how long you have to leave it in the ferric chloride for, and you're not guessing. This one is done on copper. This one is done on zinc. You can see. And this is a good example in regard to it breaking down, because the ferric chloride got under the Aquatint and started lifting it off. So you've gone for a light grey, darker, 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 and then the Aquatint started to lift off. So it goes back to grey. But it gives you some idea of the tonal range. Also, this is a nice example of what I mentioned in the hard ground etching printing stage. This one. When I said that it takes about 3 or 4 printings for the print to actually show you its true colours. So you'll see this has been printed 3 times, and each time it's a little bit darker. So if I printed this again, it'll be a little bit darker, and that's probably about as dark as it's going to get. Okay. So now we're just going to apply the Aquatint. And to do that, we're going to work in this room here. This is basically the Aquatint room, the Aquatint booth, with the Aquatint box at the back. When working in here, it is imperative that you wear a mask. Normally, when I'm working in here, this door will be closed, but obviously for the benefit of the demonstration video, I have to have it open, but normally it will be closed because you don't want any of this rosin dust getting out into the room because it might be inhaled by other people. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put my mask on. Okay, now we're going to go into the Aquatint booth. You're going to see this big box here, which is the Aquatint box. Inside that, at the very bottom of it, will be a layer of rosin dust. What we're going to first do is we're going to try and get that dust up into the air so it becomes a fine powder inside the box so that it'll actually fall down and rest across the plate. Now to do that, we use this little handle here. You can see, it just lifts up like that. Okay. And you give it a good turn. And then you lock it back in, like that. Because inside here there's a little shelf that the plate is going to sit on. As it says here, make sure the Aquatint box is empty before you turn the handle. Because what some students do, they'll put their plate in first, turn the handle, the plate gets thrown around inside the box, and then it's a treasure hunt to try and find it. So basically you turn it first, then you're going to put your plate in. So after you turn for about 20-25 times, you're going to wait for about a minute and a half for the rosin dust to start to settle, because in that there's going to be large particles which you don't want, so they'll settle first. You just want the fine particles. So you wait about, it takes about a minute and a half to 2 minutes. Right. Got my plate here, it's already been beveled and degreased. A little shelf here, a little griddle. The plate's going to sit on that. Okay. Now I want you to bear in mind, as you're looking at this, that plate is nice and shiny. When it comes out of here, it won't be nice and shiny. There's going to be a white layer of dust on top of that. Okay. That's about right. So, there. Yeah, open it up. You're going to see all this dust coming out. This is one of the reasons why this door would normally be closed. Lift her up. Gently put her in. Close it up. And then you can leave, and that takes about, you're going to leave it in there for about another minute and a half to 2 minutes for that dust to actually settle down. But as you can see, there's a lot of rosin dust in there. We don't want to be dragging that out into the room, because if it gets into your lungs, it's not good. It's not good at all. Right, so the plate has been in the Aquatint box now for about 2 minutes, so I'm going to take her out. I do this very gently, because the Aquatint that's on there is very delicate. If I bang this, because it's a dust, it'll go everywhere. So just going to pop it down here. And that close that up. And normally what I would do at this stage is I would step out and close the door for about a minute and a half, because any of the rosin particles that are in the air, I want those to settle down, because I'm now going to be using an open flame, and large clouds of dust and open flames can often lead to explosive results. So we just basically let it settle down and then go back in. So this door would normally be closed. As you can see from here though, and the plate is no longer shiny, it's kind of got a matte surface on it. That's basically the rosin powder that's now sitting on the top. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to heat that slightly so the rosin powder melts, but just enough to stick it to the plate and not enough for it to melt everywhere. So that, we need this, and we need this. And because I'm lazy, I like to sit down. So I get a stool. And very gently, underneath the surface of the plate, you're going to start heating it. You really have to pay attention here, because once it starts to melt, it will melt really, really quickly. And the way you know that it's melting is the fact that it goes transparent. It goes from being opaque to being transparent, and then you'll gently move it across the plate. This can be quite tricky, and your first couple of attempts mightn't work, but as I said before, you're not damaging the plate in any way. So all you have to do is get a little bit of methylated spirits, clean off the rosin powder, degrease it again, and then you can go again. Oh, starting to go, see, starting to go. It just starts to go transparent. That's it done. It's very handy when you're doing it to be at eye level so you can actually see it as it's moving across. That's why I have the chair as well. Okay. Now this plate is going to be very, very hot, so I'll leave it in there for a minute or two before you take it out, especially if it's a big plate because you're not going to be able to handle it. But it's a small plate, I'm just going to grab a little spatula and take her out. That's hot, so be careful. Pop her down. Okay. You're now finished in here, so we can close this up. Switch off the light. This goes back there. And we're done. Okay. And because we're not around floating powder anymore, we can take off the mask, which is always a godsend. Here we are. This should be a nice even layer of rosin dust that's stuck to the plate. The best way to find out is to borrow a magnifying glass off myself or John. It's a pity you can't see in, but yeah. What I'm seeing under there now is thousands and thousands and thousands of little specks of what look like very light honey. Yeah. If you see, when you look on the magnifying glass, large clumps of the rosin dust, it means you've overheated it and you need to really clean it off again and start again. But this doesn't look too bad at all. It's very fine. If I left it in the box for a little longer to be a more dense level of aquatint on the plate, this is fine. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is, like I did with the hard ground etching, I'm going to cover the back of the plate. You're going to be gentle with this now, because that's easily scratched, so just be gentle. So, same as we did before, so take it off. Just gently stick it down, work my way across. There we are. Nice and gentle. Get up. As I say, you might find your own way of putting this on. This is just the way I find most convenient. Take off the excess. As I say, at any stage you're doing this, if you have any questions, myself and John are always here to answer them. If you want to know if the aquatint is on okay, just ask. If you need to borrow Big Bertha, just ask. But, as I say, if at first you don't succeed, there's no penalty for trying again. Now, same as before, I'm going to stick a little tab on the back. Well, now that is now ready to go into the acid, or the ferric chloride that we use here. If at this stage there's any area on this plate that you don't want to be etched, you just want it to be crisp and clean and white, you would stop it out using the stop out solution. The stop out solution you would use here is the Brunswick Black. It's the other container, not the smaller container with the green lid, it's the other container. For the simple reason that the straw hat, the other solution, you clean off with methylated spirits, but you also clean off the rosin dust with methylated spirits. So if you use that stop out, there is a chance you might affect the aquatint on the plate. But if you use the Brunswick Black, which you clean off with white spirit, it doesn't affect it at all. It just takes it a little longer to dry. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to etch this for 30 seconds. And I'm going to try and make one of these. Okay. And we work on up till we get a little more dense. This is an example of a plate that I've already done, which gives you an idea of what I'm going to do. So I'm going to just do 3 bands on this. I'm going to do 30 seconds, 2 minutes and 5 minutes, just to give you a big raw band of what you can actually do. So, over to the tray of ferric chloride. Right, here we are again at the bath of ferric chloride. For etching for Aquatint, the etching times are a lot less. We're talking seconds, not minutes. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do 30 seconds, and then I'm going to do a 2 minute, and then I'm going to do 5 minutes. And it'll give you a nice clear band. So in we go. Okay, sticky out. And then, oh, down. Start stopwatch. Just going to count for 30 seconds. Now, as I said before, it's very important not to get any of this in here, especially when you do an Aquatint, because you're dealing with such small etching times. That's it. Take her out. Try and rinse her off as quickly as possible, because any residue of ferric chloride on there will continue to etch, so make sure you rinse it off as quickly as possible. And now, like just like before, I'll go in to the video wash for 3 minutes. So I'll see you in 3 minutes. Give it a good rinse off as well. Okay, switch that off. Now I'm not going to put it back in here straight away, because what I want to do is I want to stop out a certain part of this plate because I don't want it to etch anymore. And to do that, we need to dry it off first, so it's going to get a bit noisy, sorry. And now I'm just going to paint across an area that I want it to stay at that tone. So for that, we just use the Brunswick Black. Well, as I say, I'm just doing a step here. This could be a picture. It could be an image that you've been working on, and you want it to be a certain tone. So that particular tone you want it to be, you just step off like so, stop it out. And that area will no longer be etched when you put it back into the ferric chloride. Okay. Nice even coat. Yep. Now I'm just going to quickly dry that with a hairdryer as well. You can leave it to dry naturally if you wish. Now this is going to go back in here. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. We have to really pay attention. I want the next area to be etched for 2 minutes. Okay. This whole area now has been etched for 30 seconds. So to get it to be etched, next area etched for 2 minutes, I need to etch it again for 1.5 minutes. So 1.5 minutes plus 30 seconds gives me the 2 minutes. With Aquatint, the etching times is cumulative. You're adding it up. Okay, so this is going to go in for another 1.5 minutes. It's going. So now when I take it out, the area that's been left uncovered will be etched for 2 minutes, so it'll be a little bit darker than the area etched for 30 seconds. And then I'm going to do it one more time for another 2 minutes, so it'll bring it up to, what's that, 4 minutes? Yeah, 4 minutes. So, but to get it to 4 minutes, I'll be etching it again for 2 minutes. So 2 minutes plus 2 minutes gives you 4 minutes. That's what you have to remember when you're doing the etching. And that's ready to go in here again. I'll for about 2 minutes. I'm going to stop this and reset it. And then after I take it out of here, I'm going to stop it out again for another area, dry that off, and then I'm going to etch it a little bit longer. Now normally I wouldn't have all this here, I'd have it at my workstation. I only have it here simply for the benefit of the video. You can really see it bubbling there as it's cleaning out that line. As I say, this can be a drawing you've done that you want to add some tone or colour to, or you might just want to build up a plate of pure tone. This is just a simple step test plate that I'm doing. Hear that fizzing? Now, what we're looking at here is this area under here has been etched for 30 seconds. This whole area here has been etched for 2 minutes. So I'm just going to dry that off. It's going to get a bit noisy again, sorry. I'm going to mark off another area, but I just want etched for 2 minutes. You might notice a little blemish along the side here. I think that's just where there's a little bit of grease on the plate. So it just goes to show how important it is to degrease the plate well. That'll be enough. There we go. Hair dryer again. So now I want this for 4 minutes, so I have to put it in for another 2 minutes. So the 2 minutes plus another 2 minutes gives me 4 minutes. Okay, we're nearly at the 2 minutes, and out we go. And rinse, give it a good rinse. And the back. Right. And then in here. And it's going to be in there for about a minute. I know it can be a little bit tedious doing all these things, but the end result can be worth it. And I'm just going to etch it one more time for luck. So off with the hairdryer again. So what I have here now is we have the first one at 30 seconds, the second one at 2 minutes. So this whole area now has been etched for 4 minutes. I'm going to put it in for another 3 minutes. So that'll be 7 minutes in all. So I'm going to mark off an area at the 4. I always recommend doing these testers because as I say, it cuts out the guessing when you come to actually do your actual etching. What I normally do is, the plate that I'm going to use, I will put in the Aquatint box at the same time with this little plate, one with my test plate, so the two of them get the same level of coverage. So I'll take them all out, I'll heat up the rosin, and then I'll do a test strip first, like I'm doing now, and then I'll print this. So then when I get my actual plate that I'm going to use for my image, I just have to look and go, I need that tone, that's 30 seconds, I need that tone, that's a minute and a half. It just helps in the long run. You don't have to do it, it's just something I do. Stopwatch going. And I'm going to put this in for another 3 minutes. So that last area that's uncovered will be etched for 7 minutes. Nearly at the 3-minute mark. There just for a minute, just to clean it off. And then we're going to take the ground off and we'll have a look at what we got. Hopefully there'll be something. If not, I'll show you the other one I did. Okay. I don't need any of this anymore. I'll tidy it all up. We have 4 or 5 of these. You just ask myself or John if you need them, and I'll show you what they are. So you say you'd leave that in there for about 2 or 3 minutes. Rinse off that. Looking at this plate, we should have an area that's been etched for 30 seconds, for 2 minutes, for 4 minutes, and then this last one will be etched for 7 minutes. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to take off the stop out, and then we have to take off the rosin before we print it. And we do that, we'll just do it back over by the Aquatint booth. Don't need that anymore. And then the first thing we'll do, I want to take off the Brunswick Black, and to do that, we need to use the white spirit. It's low odor white spirit called Primary Wash. Oh, that's a bit too much. Don't need that much. Give it away. Take a little bit doing, because there is a toothy surface to this now with the Aquatint, so it can take a little bit of cleaning. Right, let's take that off. Now before you print it, you need to take off the rosin powder which is still on there. And to do that, you use methylene spirits with the M on it. So you can see that. I'm going to come in close to you there so you can actually see. Just show you the plate. I'm going to come in close if that's okay. And you can see there with the light on it, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes. So you got a tonal range on that one plate. Now you can do this for different, you can do it for 10 seconds, 5 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, depending on what you actually want. But that's just a brief example just to show you what you can get. Okay, now we've got to the stage where we're ready to print our Aquatint plate. The stop out's been taken off the plate with the low odor white spirit. The rosin Dust has been taken off the plate with the methylated spirits, and even at this stage you can see different grades of tone. Aquatint is another intaglio based etching technique, so you print it up the exact same way. So we've got the same setup as we had for the hard ground etching. We have our ink, our scrim, our rags, our tissue, and our cut card for applying the ink. So we'll just get started. Cut card, a little bit of ink. This ink has been mixed about 50-50 with extender, which loosens it up, makes it easy to wipe, but it still gives you a very good density of pigment. Okay. The ink itself is kept underneath in a little tube, and the extender is kept in a tin just over here. So just ink it up, turn it around until the whole plate is covered. Turn it around. Okay. That's okay. And now I'm just going to use the second piece of card just to take off the surface ink. It pops over there. And this ink is perfectly usable if you're going to do an addition or print more plates. So we have our scrim. Tight little ball, lift up the plate. You don't have to lift up the plate, as I said before, I'm just doing it because it's a small little plate, so it makes it easy to wipe. And you gently wipe it from the centre, applying no great pressure. Now Aquatint will clean off fairly quickly. That's enough. A bit of tissue paper just to buff it down and clean up any worn areas. So. Okay. And my rag, clean rag, just to wipe the edges. A little bit tricky with a small plate like this, I don't want to drop it on the ground. Okay. Around. So just get a little bit of tissue just to quickly buff those edges a little bit more. You can also wipe the back of the plate if it gets quite dirty. I'm not going to bother with this one because I'm putting it on some tissue. Okay. That is now ready to print, so I'm just going to depup it there. I'm going to block my paper. As before, normally the water bath is over the other side of the print room, but I'm just have it here just for convenience. This paper's been soaking for about 20 minutes because it's a nice piece of Fabriano, so it's a little bit more high quality paper than the cartridge paper that you might be using yourselves. Nice and safe. So here we go. Clean hands. Take her out to dry. Onto the blotting paper. And then we're on. As I said, you want the paper damp, you don't want it wet. That's okay. I'm now going to move the plate over to the etching press. We're ready to put the paper on the plate now. I've just put a sheet of newsprint on the surface of the bed. It's just if there's dirt, if there's ink on the back of the plate, it will transfer onto the etching bed and you have to give it a clean afterwards. This way it saves a little bit of extra time when cleaning up. So my dampened paper on top. And another sheet of newsprint on top of that. I'm just going to fold that one over, save the palette. Right. Blankets down. Get these nice and flat so there's no crinkles. just on the wheel. Keeping an eye on the blankets as you go through. You see they start to crinkle up a little bit. You want to keep it flat. Right, that goes all the way through. Okay, it's gone through now. You can see the actual newsprint's a little bit damp. That's because it's taken out some of the moisture out of that paper and stopped it going into the blankets. You've got some nice, good embossment there, so the pressure's good. And let's see what we've got. Oh, look at that. There we are. And that just gives you a very brief idea of some of the tones that you can get with Aquatint. This is just a very simple test strip that I've done. Obviously the image that you're using would be a lot more complicated than this, but it just gives you a good idea of some of the tonality you can actually get from Aquatint. So when you've pulled your print from the press, the next thing you do is you want to put it under the drying boards. It will dry naturally in the open air, but what can happen is the paper will cockle and you'll end up having to dampen it again and flatten it again. So just get a sheet of tissue out of the tissue drawer, which is there. Put another sheet of tissue on top, and these are drying boards. Pick one up, put it down. Normally this board would be full of prints, and then you just pick up another one and put it on top, so you have a smooth side facing up, because that has a textured side which over time can actually mark your paper. So give that a day or two and you can come in and collect your prints and take them home with you. Okay, like all intaglio processes, the cleaning up process is very, very important. You have to leave the surfaces and the palette knives clean for the next person. As we said before, you've got some very good quality ink here. If you wish to take it home with you, all you need to do is wrap it up in a little bit of plastic with a little bit of tape around it. And as long as the air doesn't get at it, this will stay fresh and usable for a good month or two. If it's a case like today, where nobody else is going to use it, unfortunately you have to get rid of it. So take up most of it with a palette knife. It's a bit of old newsprint. You can get it out of our scrap paper drawer, which is here. Just get most of it off. The more you get off at this stage, the less you have to wipe off later on, basically. Okay, that's about all I'm going to get off from that. Move it up. And that goes in the bin. Okay. To clean up, we use vegetable oil and soda crystals and water. So the first thing you're going to do is put out some oil and on the plate as well, or any place there's ink. The vegetable oil breaks down the oil-based ink, which makes it easy to clean up. So you're going to get yourself a semi-soiled rag, and you're going to start cleaning up. It's very easy, very quick. Okay. Cool. Make sure you wipe the handles, because that's the first thing the next person is going to grab. The amount of times I've grabbed one of these things and had a black hand. Okay. So fold it around. Nice. The scrim I was using, I've put back into the plastic bag, so I'll be able to use that again and again. And then here as well. And place clean. Turn it around. Try and use as much of the rag as you can before you use a clean one. Okay, that's all the ink gone. But like I said before in the other demos, there's a thin slick of vegetable oil on all the surfaces and on the palette knife. And to get rid of that, we'll use the soda crystals and water. this is where you can use a clean rag. Nice and clean. Edges. Right. Okay. And the surface itself. You want it nice and clean, so the next person who comes along doesn't have to spend any time cleaning, because you could be that next person. Okay, and that's the cleaning done. The plates now is ready to wrap in a bit of tissue paper and newsprint, and for you to take it home with you. Okay. So that is basically Aquatint from the basics. This is just a plain test strip that I've done today, and the images you'll be making obviously will be a lot more complicated than what this is, but this is just gives you a good idea of some of the tones you can get. If any time during the process you have any problems, both myself or John are always available on hand to give you any help or answer any questions, so please don't be afraid to come up and ask us. So I hope you enjoyed this video on Aquatint. I hope you give it a go. It's a wonderful process to use, and I will see you in the next video.